Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome to another video. Today we're going to be doing section 3, lesson 4. Section 3 is all about tajweed. And lesson 4 I actually decided to change a little bit. I was going to do something else, which is basically I think lesson 4 was going to be ahkam mim sakin. But I decided to turn it into a supplemental video. And in the supplemental video we're going to talk about Iltiqa-as-Sakinain. And specifically a special case of Iltiqa-as-Sakinain and a special diacritical mark that you in the Indo-Pak subcontinent might be familiar with. It's a tiny Nuun that occurs, which is called a Nuun Qutni, and we're going to talk about that today. So that's today's lesson. So let's get into it. On the agenda today, we're going to do a review of the previous lesson. We're going to do our warm-ups as usual. I'm going to ask you to do the warm-ups, don't skip them. We're going to review our letter collections, and then we're going to go into the meat and potatoes of today's lecture, which is going to be Iltiqa-as-Sakinain and Nuun Qutni. Finally, I'm going to give you a few exercises and an exercise supplement that you will perform, and basically that will take care of, or that will be the end of today's lesson. Let's get into it. So for review, iqlab. The literal meaning for iqlab, it means to change. That's the literal word meaning of the word iqlab. And this rule only applies to one letter. So if you remember, we were talking about ahkam Nuun as-sakin and Tanween. And whenever Nuun sakin or Tanween is preceded by the letter ba, then the iqlab rule applies. And what happens is that we change the pronunciation of the Nuun, which is the Nuun sakin in the Tanween, or the Nuun sakin that occurs as part of Nuun sakin and Tanween rules. We change it into a mim sakin and we hold it in our lows a little bit. Not lows, and our nose a little bit. And basically, when you see this rule applied, what you will see is that the Nuun sakin or Tanween is written with a tiny meme on it. Little meme is written on it, and that's how you know that the rule that is currently being applied is the rule of iqlab. And here were some examples, and I'll try to pronounce some of these as quickly as I can so that we can, if you want to get a better review, you can go watch the previous video, which is section 3, lesson 3, and that's all about iqlab. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Let me find my mouse here. There we go. La yunbadhanna min ba'di man baqila idhin ba'atha hillun bihadha sa'ilun bi'adhabin وعاد بالقارعة محيط بالكافرين. Okay, so those are examples of iqlab, and if you want, you can go into the details of it in the previous video, and you will get all the details of it in the previous video. So let's get going. As part of your warm-ups, as part of each video, watch the warm-up video. You don't have to watch the detailed warm-up video. You can watch the short warm-up video. Please do not skip. That is important to make sure that you exercise your mouth, nose, throat, and chest to recite the Quran. Now let's get into letter collections. We've been memorizing a collection of letters, and the throat letters and letters of izhar, lip letters, tafkhim letters, idgham letters, mad letters, and qalqala letters. So let's get into it. Do you guys remember the throat letters? There are 6 letters of throat or izhar. They're the same. And there are hamza, ha, ain, ha, ghain, kha. Hamza, ha, ain, ha, ghain, kha. Lip letters are those that their primary point of articulation is your lip. And there are 4 letters. They are fa, waw, ba, and mim. Tafkhim letters are those letters that are always pronounced heavy, and those are pronounced as if you have a mouthful of food, or as if you are almost like an opera singer. Your sound is going to be heavy, and those are Sad, Dad, Ta, Dha, Ghain, Kha, and Qaf. Those are the 7 letters of tafkhim. Idgham letters, if you remember. Well, now you have learned idgham bi ghunna and idgham bi ghayr ghunna. There are 6 letters of idgham, which are yarmalun, ya, ra, mim, lam, waw, and noon. And ya, mim, waw, and noon are idgham bi ghunna, and lam and ra are idgham bi ghayr ghunna. Again, you can watch the ahkam and Nuun-as-Sakinah with Tanween videos to review. But these 6, ya, ra, mim, lam, waw, noon, or yarmalun, are the 6 letters of idgham. Mud letters are 3, alif, waw, and ya. These are the letters of elongation. And there are 5 letters of qalqala. We have to bounce our sound whenever these letters appear with a sukoon on them. And those are qaf, ta, ba, jim, dal, or jad qutub, or qutub jad. You can remember it that way. Whenever these 5 letters have a sukoon on them, the sound has to be bounced a little bit. You can watch the qalqala letters video. It's a part of the it's in the channel. So let's get into it. Iltiqa-as-Sakinain, which is today's lesson, it means the meeting of 2 sukoons. What do we mean by that specifically? There's a lot of details here. We'll unpack it one at a time. We will not be discussing this entire rule because this is only a supplemental video. There's only like one case or one exception or case of Iltiqa-as-Sakinain that we will discuss in today, but the details we will probably discuss in a future video. So don't ask me about the details of Iltiqa-as-Sakinain. Today we're just discussing one rule. But as part of this, what we have been discussing in the past, as you know, we have been discussing ahkam and Nuun as-Sakinah with Tanween, and basically the reason I wanted to put this as one case of Iltiqa-as-Sakinain in this lesson as a supplement is because even though this case of Iltiqa-as-Sakinain, meeting of the 2 sukoons, is not really ahkam and Nuun as-Sakinah with Tanween, but it is closely related, and it is almost a special case of ahkam and Nuun as-Sakinah with Tanween. It's not quite. You will see what I mean in just a second. But that's why I'm putting it as part of this exercise supplement. Sorry, not an exercise supplement, as part of this supplemental video for Iltiqa-as-Sakinain. So we will get into this rule in just a second. Part of the review, to make sure that we are primed for learning this one exception or this one exceptional rule of Iltiqa-as-Sakinain and Nuun Qutni specifically, and where that comes from, is that we need to review Tanween. And if you remember, Tanween, and because this rule applies to Tanween is actually a Nuun sakin that lies at the end of the letter. So if you remember, Tanween sounds like a Nuun sakin, right? But we don't write it down. It has a double vowel, fathatan, dammatan, or kasrataan on top of it, but they're basically equivalent to each other. So the 3 examples that you see on your screen right now are ta fatha noon sukoon is equal to ta fathatan, or tan is equal to tan. They're the same. Ta kasra noon sukoon tin and ta kasratan tin are equivalent. Ta dhamma noon sukoon tun and ta dammatan tun are equivalent to each other. This we have to remember, or we have to keep in the back of our head. We have to remember, it's part of your review, in order to understand the rule, which is Iltiqa-as-Sakinain and Nuun. Now, there are many cases of Iltiqa-as-Sakinain, but today we are only concerned with one particular case. And the rule is of part of Iltiqa-as-Sakinain that we're going to be discovering today is that 2 sakin letters, when 2 sakin letters have sukoon on them, they cannot meet between 2 words if 2 words are next to each other and the first word ends in a sukoon and the second word begins, or basically when you are continuing recitation, then the 2 words, the first word of the second word also gets a sukoon, then they cannot meet. That's the rule. And basically when words end in Tanween and the word immediately following has a hamzatul wasl, which is a tiny slot, we will talk about hamzatul wasl later, but I will explain to you what the hamzatul wasl, the diacritical mark, looks like today. So basically, when a word ends in tanween, whether it's fathatan, dammatan, kasrataan, doesn't matter, but whenever a word ends in tanween, but the word immediately following has a hamzatul wasl, and the letter following the hamzatul wasl is either a sakin letter, meaning it has a sukoon on it, or mushaddad letter, meaning it has a shadda on it. And if we continue reciting, we have to drop the hamzatul wasl. The hamzatul wasl gets cancelled, and the noon sakin of the tanween acquires a noon kasra, and the sakin letter of the next word is joined with that tanween with the noon kasra. Now this is a lot to digest. We will get into it in a little bit. But the other rule is that if we stop at this point, we do not add this noon kasra. This noon kasra is written in some scripts of the Quran, and this noon kasra is sometimes called Nuun Qutni, and we will go over what the Nuun Qutni looks like in just a second. But this is quite a mouthful, but I will try to summarize it best I can, all these points in just a bit. The rule of Iltiqa-as-Sakinain that we're concerned about is one particular case, and the rule is that when two sakin letters when two words are joined together, then two sakin letters cannot meet between two words. If the first word ends with a sakin letter and the second word, the first pronounceable letter in the second word begins with the sakin letter or mushaddad letter, then that's not allowed. And when a word ends in a tanween and the word immediately following has a hamzatul wasl on it, and the letter following the hamzatul wasl is either a sakin or mushaddad letter, and if we continue reciting and the noon sakin of the tanween acquires a noon kasra and joins the sakin letter to the next word. Wow, what a lengthy explanation. I'm sorry I don't have a more, what's the word I'm looking for, more concise way of explaining it to you, but with examples and lots of practice you will get it. Let's get into. Now, why am I explaining an exceptional rule like this to you guys? Now, I have to admit that even though it is a little bit easier to pronounce this exception with the Nuun Qutni written in the Mus'haf, when I learned first to recite the Quran, I actually learned to recite this rule with the Nuun Qutni. I didn't actually know about this rule of Iltiqa-as-Sakinain, how two sakin letters in between words are not allowed to meet. This exception was actually taught to me, and if you have had a chance to read the Indo-Pak Mus'haf, I think it's called what's that called, the Majidi script, it's called Nuun Qutni. You will see that there is a tiny noon marked in the Mus'haf. Now this actually, I think in my humble opinion, makes it a little bit easier for beginners to pronounce this exception with the Nuun Qutni marked. But the problem is that this Nuun Qutni approach rule only applies when we're joining two words together. What do I mean by that? When we're joining two words, the first word ends with a tanween, and because it ends with the tanween, notice that it has a noon sukoon at the end, right? So tanween is equivalent to a noon sukoon at the end, and we're joining the two words together. If we stop at that point, then the hamzatul wasl gets pronounced and the tanween gets cancelled. Tanween gets skipped. However, it may not always be the case that we can stop at such points because of the impact of the meaning. So for example, if we stop at a letter and that letter happens to, stop at a word and that word happens to end in tanween, and the next word happens to have the hamzatul wasl and the next letter after the hamzatul wasl has a sukoon on it, we may or may not be allowed to stop because of the impact on the meaning. So it may not be the case that we can stop at such points because of the impact of the meaning, and therefore it is actually advisable for beginners to not worry about this exception, but to learn this rule in the Uthmani script, even though it might be harder to learn it this way. What do I mean? Now, the only way that I can explain all of this in detail is actually going through some exercises or some actual examples. So let's go ahead and do that. The table that you see on your screen right now contains the first column, the name and the surah number, and the specific ayah is the second column, where the example of Iltiqa-as-Sakinain occurred, and the word how it's written, the words how they're written in the Uthmani script is the third column, and how they should be read is how it's written in the Indo-Pak/Majidi script is in the fourth column. So let's go ahead and take a look at the example. So remember, let's find my mouse here. There it is. This is an example. The word is khayran. Khayran. That's the word. But after the fathatan, the next letter is actually hamzat al-wasl. And immediately following the hamzat al-wasl, the letter is a lam sukoon. So this is an example of iltiqa-as-Sakinain. Basically, two sukoons are meeting, and that's not allowed to happen. The khayran, the noon sukoon of this fathatan, needs to meet with this lam sukoon, but khayran and al-wasiyya are two different words, and this is not allowed to happen. So the way we need to pronounce it is kha fatha ya sukoon khay, ra fathatan lam sukoon ranil khayranil khayranil wasiyya. Now notice that the ra fatha and the noon sukoon would be khayran in normal circumstances, but because of this exception, the way we pronounce it is we say khayra, and the noon sukoon gets a kasra below it, and it gets connected to the next letter, which becomes khayranil wasiyya. Khayranil wasiyya. And notice that if we read it in the Majidi script, which is the Indo-Pak script, this little tiny noon, this one that you see right there, if I can get my mouse to zoom in right there, this little noon sukoon right there, this little noon has a kasra below it, and it's telling you that if you are going to continue pronouncing, you're going to pronounce it like this: kha fatha ya sukoon khay, ra fatha noon kasra lam sukoon, khayranil wasiyya, khayranil wasiyya. In the Uthmani script, you will find that this noon Qutni is not there. But remember, I told you that it may not always be the case that we are allowed to stop, or that we may not be allowed to stop. So if we, let's assume for argument's sake that we had stopped, we were talking about that exception as well. The way we would pronounce it is khayra al-wasiyatu. Now, if we had done it this way, this hamzat al-wasl can't get cancelled because we stopped at khayra, and this hamzat al-wasl is the definite article, and al-wasiyya, I believe wasiyya means to, what's that called? I forgot what the name is or what the word is, but basically it's related to your bequest when passing, or your will when you pass. I believe that's the word. The wasiyya is the will or bequest when you pass. But Allahu a'lam if that's the name of this word. If can somebody correct me if I'm incorrect. But notice al-wasiyya is a separate word and khayran is a separate word. If we pronounce them together, then we have to do khayranil wasiyya. But if we stop, we say khayra, and then we continue with al-wasiyya. Now, notice there is a little sili, this slad, lam, little sili in the Majidi script, letting you know that it is possible to stop here. But in the Uthmani script, it's not there. So the Uthmani script is recommended that you continue and basically you pronounce it khayranil wasiyya. Now, the reason that I mentioned that it is actually not recommended to learn it in the Uthmani script way is that depending on where this rule or where this exception occurs, you may not be allowed to stop. So you can't just say, you might not be able to say yawma idhin al-haqqu. The reason you might not be able to do that is because it might have an impact on the meaning that you don't realize. So if the Uthmani script does not have a slitty or little jim letting you know that you're allowed to stop, or recommending to stop there, then technically speaking you should continue reciting. So this is going to become khayran al-wasiyya, right? But if you were doing it through the Majidi script, you might think that this dal doesn't have kasrataan below it. This is some kind of Nuun sukoon, but that's not the case actually. This is actually a special way that the Majidi script or the Indo-Pak script writes kasrataan, and this little Nuun right here is called the Nuun Qutni. The Uthmani script, the script that you guys are learning, does not have this Nuun Qutni, does not have this little Nuun. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue reciting these examples, and the way we're going to do it is first I'm going to pronounce it together, and then I'm going to first I'm going to spell it out a little bit, and then I'm going to pronounce it out. But you will be expected to do this without having to spell it out. So let's go ahead and do that. Ya fatha wa sukoon yaw, mim fatha ma, yawma, hamza kasra'i, yawma'i, dhal kasratan, lam sukoon, dhinil, yawma idhinil, ha fatha qaf shadda haq, qaf dammatu, haqqu, yawma idhinil haqqu. And you can use this fourth column, this column right here that you see on the right hand side, which is the Majidi script version, to see how it's actually supposed to be pronounced. I want you to learn it to pronounce it, or I want you to learn this from the Uthmani script, and this is going to be a little bit tougher for you, but this is how you should learn it from the Uthmani script. The Majidi script column can be your supplemental, letting you know how it's supposed to be pronounced, okay? Jim fathaja, mim kasra ya sukoon mi, jami, ain fathatan lam shadda anil, jami anil, lam fatha la, jami anil la, zal kasra ya sukoon dhi, jami anil ladhi. Actually, let's do the last two as your, I guess, short homework, right? You can spell it out and pronounce it out yourself. This is going to be qawmanillah, mathalanil qawm. And notice how the Majidi script is telling you that that's how it's supposed to be pronounced, and it says how it's supposed to be pronounced. And this is your, these last two words, you can spell them out yourselves and see if you are able to follow along. But in your self-test, you will be expected to do this without having to spell it out. So don't worry, there's going to be a very lengthy exercise video. I think there's like 70 odd examples that I found online. Somebody gathered all of them in one document, and I will go through all of them in an exercise supplement video coming up. Oh, I've already spoke about this. You will be expected to demonstrate the recitation of the words without spelling them out. So you yawma idhinil haqq, you will be expected to see and recite it directly from sight without having to spell them out. That's going to be part in your self-test. You will need to demonstrate this, which is going to be on Iltiqa-as-Sakinain. In conclusion, what did we learn today? We learned about Iltiqa-as-Sakinain and the Nuun Qutni diacritical mark that occurs in some scripts of the Quran. The Iltiqa-as-Sakinain is when two separate words are meeting, and the first word has a Tanween at the end, and the second word is starting with the Hamzatul Wasl and the letter immediately following Hamzatul Wasla is either a sakin letter or a mushaddad letter, then the tanween of the first letter, the noon sukoon of that tanween gets a kasra below it, and it gets connected to the sakin letter of the second word. For example, يَوْمَ إِذٍ الْحَقِّ لُوطٌ الْمُرْسَلِينَ قَوْمًا اللَّهِ, and there are a lot of examples that we will go over in the next set of exercise videos. So the next few videos will be, I will go over an exercise supplement. In this exercise supplement, I will go over a lot of examples of this Iltiqa-as-Sakinain. After that, we will go over ahkam mim sakin, and after that, it will be my final Qaida Nuraniya video. So that's it for today. Jazakallah khair for watching. If you like this video, please go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and share the video to help me spread this knowledge. Jazakallah khair for watching. I will see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.